Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts or story in the comments and subscribe to our latest stories. Before I start, tell me where you are watching me from. I wonder which cities and towns will join me in this memory that will follow me for years. It started on a quiet Thursday afternoon, the kind where the house feels too still, and even the ticking clock sounds louder than usual. I was sitting by the window, holding a cup of lukewarm tea, scrolling through my phone when I saw it, something that would change how I looked at one of the closest people in my life. Her name was Claire. We'd been friends for nearly 20 years. We'd met when our kids were still in preschool, both of us juggling work, motherhood, and the strange loneliness that comes with pretending everything is fine. Claire was the kind of woman who could make anyone laugh. She had this way of turning even the hardest day into something bearable. I trusted her. More than most people, really, but that day, I learned that trust is fragile. One careless act can shatter it, and when it does, it echoes louder than any argument ever could. It started with a message. My neighbor, Jenna, had texted me a screenshot of a group chat I wasn't supposed to see. At first, I didn't even realize what I was looking at. But then, my eyes caught my own name 3 times in a row, followed by words that hit me like cold water. They were Claire's words. She had been talking about me. Not in a cruel way exactly, but in that subtle, half-kind, half-judging way that hurts more than open criticism. She said I was too sensitive lately, that I made everything about myself, that I played the victim. It was strange reading those words from someone who had held my hand through my divorce, someone who had cried with me the night my mother passed. I remember staring at the screen for a long time, my thumb trembling slightly above the keyboard. My first instinct was to call her right away, to ask why. But instead, I set the phone down, turned off the sound, and just sat there. The air felt heavier. Even the sunlight looked different through the curtains, colder, sharper. That evening, I tried to act normal. I made dinner, fed the dog, and answered a few emails, but my mind kept circling back to her words. The memories of our friendship replayed in my head: coffee on rainy mornings, long drives with the windows down, secrets whispered over wine. And now, all of that felt tainted. Still, a part of me wanted to believe there was a mistake. Maybe she was venting, maybe someone misunderstood her. So, I decided to wait until we met in person. That weekend, we had plans to visit a local art fair together, something we did every year without fail. Saturday came, and I almost cancelled. My heart wasn't ready, but curiosity, or maybe hope, pushed me out the door. When I saw her, standing near the entrance, wearing her usual denim jacket and that big carefree smile, I felt something inside me twist. "Hey, you made it," she said, her voice as warm as ever. She hugged me tightly, and for a moment, I wanted to believe nothing had changed. But I couldn't stop noticing small things: how she avoided eye contact a few times, how her laughter sounded a bit too forced, how she seemed to steer the conversation away from anything personal. We walked among the booths, pretending everything was fine. I smiled, nodded, even laughed at her jokes, but inside, I was waiting for her to say something, to acknowledge what she'd said about me. But she didn't. Not a word. At one point, we stopped by a booth selling hand-painted vases. I remember her pointing at one with blue flowers and saying, "This reminds me of you, soft and fragile." Soft and fragile. The same words she had used in that chat. That's when I felt something shift inside me. I turned to her and asked quietly, "Claire, can I ask you something?" She looked surprised. "Of course. Did you mean what you said about me, in the group chat?" The color drained from her face. She froze for a second, then looked down, pretending to examine a vase. "You saw that?" she whispered. I nodded. "Jenna sent it. I wasn't looking for it. But I saw." For a long moment, she didn't speak. The crowd buzzed around us, music, laughter, chatter, but between us, there was only silence. Finally, she sighed and said, "I didn't mean for you to see that. I was just frustrated, that's all." "Frustrated about what?" I asked. She hesitated. "You've been different lately. Sadder. And I didn't know how to talk to you about it. So, I vented. It was wrong, I know. I should have come to you." Her voice cracked slightly, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. But betrayal isn't something you can patch up with an apology. It sits deeper. It changes how you look at someone. We walked in silence for the rest of the fair. Every now and then, she tried to start small talk, but the warmth between us had cooled. When we finally said goodbye, her hug felt unfamiliar, too light, too cautious. That night, I sat in bed thinking about all the things we'd shared over the years. It wasn't just the words she said, it was the ease with which she'd said them. Maybe friendship, like glass, doesn't always break loudly. Sometimes it cracks quietly, until one day you realize it's already in pieces. As I turned off the light, I told myself I'd decide what to do tomorrow. Whether to forgive, forget, or let go completely. But one thing was already clear: things would never be the same again, and that realization hurt more than anything she had written. The morning after the art fair, I woke up early. The house was quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. I made coffee, sat by the window, and watched the sky turn from grey to pale gold. Normally, I loved mornings like that, peaceful, steady, but that day, everything felt heavy, like the silence itself was pressing against my chest. I kept thinking about Claire. I tried to make sense of it all, to understand how someone who had stood beside me through some of my hardest years could so easily talk about me behind my back. I wasn't perfect, God knows that, but I had always been loyal. When she was going through her divorce, I was there. When her daughter ran away for 3 days, it was me she called at 2 a.m. And yet, somehow, I was the one who had become the sensitive one, the drama. Around noon, I got a message from her. Just one line: "Can we talk?" I stared at it for a while before typing back, "Not right now." Then I set my phone face down and walked away, but ignoring her didn't make the ache go away. It just left space for the questions to grow louder. Maybe she really didn't mean it. Maybe it was just careless words said in frustration. Or maybe, and this hurt the most, she had thought those things for a long time and just never said them aloud until now. That evening, I took a walk. The neighborhood was calm, leaves crunching under my shoes, kids playing somewhere down the block. I passed Claire's house, half hoping she wouldn't see me. But luck wasn't on my side. She stepped out of her front porch just as I was passing by, holding a mug and looking startled. "Hey," she said softly. "Can we talk for just a minute?" I hesitated, but I nodded. She came down the steps slowly, like she was afraid I might run. "I've been thinking about what happened," she began. "And I need you to know I never meant to hurt you. You're one of the most important people in my life." I watched her face. The way her voice trembled wasn't fake, she looked genuinely sorry. But apologies are complicated things, they don't undo what's been done, and they don't erase the words that echo in your head when you're alone. "I appreciate that," I said quietly. "But it's not that simple, Claire. You said things that made me question everything about our friendship." She nodded quickly. "I know. I hate myself for that. I was just angry. I felt like you were pulling away, and I didn't know how to reach you. So I said things I shouldn't have." Her words hit me harder than I expected. Pulling away. Maybe she was right. Maybe I had been distant lately. Life had been heavy: work, family, my own loneliness, and I'd stopped being as open as before. But that didn't excuse what she said. "You could have just asked," I said. "I would have told you what was wrong." "I was scared," she whispered. "I thought maybe you didn't trust me anymore." There was something about the way she said it, so small, so sincere, that made me stop. I had never thought of Claire as someone who could be insecure about our friendship. She was always the confident one, the one who seemed sure of her place in everyone's life. For a moment, we just stood there. The evening air was cool, and the faint sound of crickets filled the silence. "Finally," she said, "can we start over?" It was such a simple question, yet it carried the weight of years. "I don't know," I said honestly. "I want to. But I can't pretend like it didn't happen." She looked down, nodded slowly, and whispered, "Then maybe we can rebuild it, one day at a time." I didn't answer. Instead, I looked at her house, the same porch where we'd shared so many cups of coffee and secrets over the years. The same porch where I had cried after losing my mother, where she had made me laugh through tears. That history doesn't disappear overnight. Before I left, she reached out and touched my arm lightly. "I'll give you space," she said. "But I'll be here if you ever want to talk." And she kept her word. 4 days, she didn't call, didn't text. Just silence. And in that silence, something unexpected happened. I started missing her. Not the version of her who hurt me, but the friend she used to be. The woman who made the hardest days bearable. A week later, I saw her again, at the grocery store. We both froze for a second near the produce aisle, then laughed at the awkwardness. She had a basket of apples, and I had one of lemons. Somehow, that made us laugh harder, and for the first time in a long time, it felt easy. We didn't talk about what happened. We didn't need to. The air between us was still careful, but it wasn't cold anymore. As I drove home that day, I thought about how fragile human connections are. How easily we can break each other, and how brave it is to try to rebuild something after it's been cracked. I wasn't sure where our friendship would go from there. Maybe it would heal. Maybe it would fade quietly. But for the first time since that message, I felt a small flicker of peace, like maybe, just maybe, some broken things can be mended if both people are willing to hold the pieces together long enough. A few weeks passed after that awkward meeting in the grocery store. Time moved differently, slowly, carefully, like the space between Claire and me was being tested for its strength. We didn't text much. We didn't call. But every so often, we'd cross paths at the farmer's market, at church, or during one of those small-town events where everyone shows up whether they want to or not. Each time, the distance between us felt a little smaller. There were still cracks, but they weren't as sharp anymore. It's strange how forgiveness doesn't always arrive as a grand gesture. Sometimes, it just creeps in quietly, in the way you no longer flinch when you hear someone's name, or the way you stop rehearsing what you'd say if you ever had the chance to confront them again. One afternoon, I was sitting on my porch reading when I saw Claire walking up the driveway. She carried a small basket wrapped in a checkered towel. My first instinct was to tense up. Old habits die hard, but then I noticed her expression. She looked nervous, like a schoolgirl about to give a presentation. "I made peach cobbler," she said, holding up the basket. "Thought you might like some." I couldn't help but smile. "You remembered." Of course she remembered. Peach cobbler was what she used to bring over every summer, back when our kids were still running barefoot through the yard, chasing fireflies. Back when our lives felt simpler, lighter. We sat together on the porch, the air warm and sweet with the scent of peaches and cut grass. For a while, we didn't talk much. Just the sound of spoons tapping against plates and the wind rustling the trees. It felt almost like old times, except quieter, gentler. "Finally," she said, "you know, I've been thinking about what happened. About what I said. And I realized something. I wasn't just frustrated with you. I was frustrated with myself." I looked at her, surprised. She sighed and continued. "You've always been the one who keeps going, no matter what. Even when life hits you hard, you find a way to stand back up. I guess I felt left behind. You were growing, and I wasn't. I was jealous, even if I didn't want to admit it." Her honesty caught me off guard. I wasn't used to hearing Claire be that vulnerable. For years, she'd been the strong one, the confident one. To hear her say that, to hear her admit she had been struggling too, made me see her differently. "I didn't know you felt that way," I said quietly. "I didn't either," she replied with a small laugh. "Not until I saw how much it hurt you. And I realized that wasn't who I wanted to be." There was something humbling about that moment. We spend so much of our lives believing we know the people closest to us, their intentions, their hearts, but sometimes we're wrong. Sometimes the people we love make mistakes not because they don't care, but because they're fighting their own silent battles. After that day, something shifted again. Slowly, we started rebuilding. Not the same friendship we had before, that one was gone, but something more honest. We didn't pretend everything was perfect. We talked more openly. If something bothered us, we said it. If one of us needed space, we gave it. One evening, she invited me over for dinner. It was simple: roast chicken, salad, a bottle of wine we both pretended we didn't know was cheap. We laughed more that night than we had in months. At one point, she showed me old photos, our kids at Halloween, us at the lake, faces full of sun and laughter. "Do you ever miss those days?" she asked. "All the time," I said. "But I think we were supposed to grow past them too." She nodded, her eyes soft. "Yeah. Maybe we just had to lose each other for a bit to remember why we mattered." That line stuck with me. Because it was true. Sometimes distance teaches you things closeness never could. It forces you to see yourself, your flaws, your pride, your fears. As I drove home that night, the moonlight spilling across the quiet streets, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: gratitude. Not just for her, but for the lesson the whole experience had brought me. I realized that forgiveness isn't just about letting someone back into your life. It's about releasing the bitterness that keeps you trapped. It's about making peace with the version of the past that didn't go the way you hoped and choosing to move forward anyway. And maybe, in a strange way, Claire's lie had given me that. It had broken something, yes, but it had also cleared space for something stronger, more real, to grow in its place. As I pulled into my driveway and saw the porch light glowing softly, I thought about how much I had changed too. I wasn't the same woman who sat by the window weeks ago, holding a cup of tea and reading words that made her heart drop. I was stronger now. Wiser. A little more cautious, perhaps, but not closed off, and for the first time since all of it began, I felt ready to fully forgive her and myself for everything that had been lost along the way. It's been 6 months since that afternoon on my porch when Claire showed up with her peach cobbler. If you had told me back then that we'd ever laugh again, genuinely laugh, I wouldn't have believed you. But life has a strange way of softening the edges of pain once you stop holding on so tightly to it. Our friendship didn't go back to what it was before, it became something quieter, steadier, more thoughtful. We no longer talked every day or shared every secret, but when we did meet, it mattered. We had both learned that closeness isn't about constant presence, it's about trust rebuilt one truth at a time. The seasons had changed again. Autumn had arrived, painting the trees in deep gold and rust. The streets were scattered with leaves, and there was a familiar crispness in the air that always made me nostalgic. One Saturday morning, I got a message from Claire: apple picking this weekend? Just like old times? I smiled. I almost said no, part of me still wary of falling back into old patterns, but something inside whispered that maybe this was the moment to close the last open chapter between us. So I said yes. When I pulled up to the orchard, the fields stretched wide under a pale sky, rows of apple trees glowing in the soft light. Claire was already there, waving at me with that same wide, slightly goofy smile that used to make me laugh years ago. She looked at peace. And maybe, for the first time, I did too. We walked through the orchard, filling baskets, sharing stories about our kids, our work, the small things that make up everyday life. The kind of conversation that doesn't demand much, but fills you quietly with comfort. At one point, she stopped and looked at me with a thoughtful expression. You know, she said, I was scared to reach out to you again after what happened. I thought I'd lost you for good. I smiled faintly. You almost did. I know. She paused, then added, but I also know that what we have, or whatever this is now, is real. I don't take that lightly anymore. We stood there among the trees, the sunlight catching on her hair, the wind moving gently between us. There was no need for long speeches or emotional confessions. We had already said everything that mattered. Now it was about living differently, with more care, more truth. Later, as we sat on the tailgate of her truck eating apples straight from the basket, I realized something I hadn't before. Betrayal had changed me, yes, but it had also opened my eyes. I had learned to see people and myself more clearly. To notice not just the pain someone causes, but also the reasons behind it, the broken parts they're trying to hide. Claire wasn't a villain in my story. She was human. Flawed, frightened, trying her best, just like I was. As the sun began to set, the orchard glowed with that golden light that only autumn brings. We didn't say much on the drive home, but the silence between us felt full, not empty. Peaceful. When I got home, I left the basket of apples on my kitchen counter and sat for a while, thinking about everything that had happened over the past months, the anger, the sadness, the hesitation, the forgiveness. I realized that sometimes, people break your trust not because they want to hurt you, but because they're lost in their own confusion. And while not every friendship survives that, some do if both hearts are willing to change. Forgiveness, I've learned, isn't weakness. It's choosing peace over pride. It's understanding that even the people we love most can disappoint us, and still deserve a chance to grow. I thought about how Claire's laughter had sounded that day, light again, genuine, and how mine had joined hers without that familiar sting in my chest. And I knew, deep down, that this was where healing had led us, not back to what we were, but forward into something new. Before I turned in for the night, I texted her, thanks for today. It felt good. Her reply came almost instantly, it did. I'm really glad we didn't give up on each other. I smiled, set my phone down, and looked out the window. The moonlight was soft against the trees, the air calm. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't replaying old words or wondering what I could have done differently. I had found peace, not because everything was perfect again, but because I had finally accepted that some endings aren't meant to close completely. Some are meant to stay open just enough to let the light in, and maybe that's what true friendship is, not the absence of mistakes, but the courage to face them, forgive, and keep walking together, even if the road looks a little different than before.